You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All righty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-host, Alex. Kevin will be joining us very shortly. But, Alex, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for asking. After a weekend of fun watching the NFL draft, it kind of felt I kept going back to last year at this time and just everything that we were kind of all going through and how uncertain everything was and how much of a beacon of hope it was to watch the NFL draft and how they pulled that off really kind of seamlessly. And then just how different it was to see kind of the normal NFL draft again this year. I thought it was a nice touch by the NFL to bring out the lazy boy chair that Roger Goodell had in his study or basement or whatever, and they had it on stage there and had the fans sitting in it. And I thought the NFL did a really good job of trying to bring back some sense of normalcy for the NFL draft. It was fun to watch. There were definitely some shockers that we'll get into and we'll talk about in this episode, but let the record show. And if you go back and watch our first round live stream that we did, the record will reflect that I was correct on the first four picks. And if it weren't for the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life, was it Miami at 5? Excuse me.
Cincinnati at 5.
Cincinnati at 5. That should have gone O-line, but they went with Jamar Chase. So that was a shocker, and it ruined my 5 for 5. Otherwise, I correctly predicted the first 4 picks, which, the first 2 were gimmies, but the next 2 were not. And that was a fun weekend, Derek.
Absolutely. And we got P2W Fantasy Sports up over there chiming in that we got some fire going on. I think that's to your correct picks there, Alex. But guys, we are joined by a special guest tonight, and we've got Ken from the Shooters Shoot Sports podcast. And I dare you to save that about 10 times fast because it might tongue twist you a little bit there. But Ken, how we doing tonight?
I'm doing really well, guys. I didn't get to tune into a lot of the NFL draft, but I do find that up here in Canada, the NFL draft isn't quite the spectacle I think that it is in the States. Of course, because we have the CFL, right? No.
Right. The real league, right?
Yeah, the real league. Actually, CFL draft was today. Didn't watch it either. So, no. Overall, my Dallas Cowboys, they went and picked linebacker in the first round. They've got some, character issues there, but was the best player available in my mind. So pretty happy to see that. But thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Cowboys picked up another linebacker kind of late, as I was thinking. It's a guy that I know pretty well, I guess you would say. But it's Jabril Cox from LSU by way of North Dakota State, or from North Dakota State by way of LSU, if you want to go that route. He transferred his last year and played 2020 there at LSU. And it's good. He's got some fond memories down here in Dallas. That's where okay. See, we've got a few people with some head injuries in the room tonight. No, I'm kidding with you, Cowboys fans. He's had some good memories down in Dallas. Of course, the FCS National Championship is in Frisco, Texas every year, which is a suburb of Dallas. And he won 3 FCS national titles with North Dakota State. So it was cool to see him. He was tumbling, and I didn't think he was going to tumble that far, but the Cowboys snagged him up. So I'll be interested to follow his career path. Hey, so Ken, tell me how you got into the podcast game. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so I started my podcast just coming up on 2 years here next month. Honestly, there was some buddies of mine here in Regina, and they had started their own baseball podcast. And I'd been listening into their episodes, and I really enjoyed it. And part of me was like, why am I not doing this with basketball? Because I played it my whole life. I love following it. And I was just like, what's preventing me from doing a podcast? And so I honestly just sat down with my fiance at the time and said that it was something that I wanted to pursue. And she's like, I think you should do it. Like, you clearly love talking about it. I mean, I never shut up about it, it seems at times. It's probably more of a creative outlet for me to to not have to talk to her about it. But I started it up, and I've had a couple different co-hosts that have come and gone, been a part of different networks and everything. But my love of podcasting never really changed. The best part about podcasting for me is just being able to meet guys like you, just people that I would have probably never met in my lifetime if it weren't through podcasting. And I mean, I've had the opportunity to interview like my childhood idol, JJ Redick, on my show. And it's something that I never thought possible. And the fact that I was able to do it because of podcasting, I mean, I'll be forever grateful for that and just want to keep going with it. So
that's awesome. Ken, yeah, I think you actually took my next question away, because that was going to be very much a, tell me about the biggest moment that you've had in doing this, and absolutely, interviewing JJ Redick, and especially if that's your childhood hero, that's a pretty big moment there. So congratulations on that one. But let's shift gears a little bit. Tell me what what you guys got working on over at the Shooter Shoots Sports podcast. Like, what do you guys have upcoming? What do the listeners need to be on the lookout for you?
For sure. Before I get into it, I'll actually say the story of how I got JJ on the show, just because, funny enough, I like to put out every couple weeks, like an Ask Me Anything type thing on Twitter. And I had a good friend of mine, and he messaged basically, well, who's your dream guest? And I said, well, JJ Redick, because he was a guy that, I'm a big Duke fan. So I grew up watching him at Duke. I followed his career in the NBA. He's someone that I've always looked up to. And I didn't tag him in the tweet, actually, but then my buddy did and said, JJ, make this happen. And then, I put my phone down, I come back, and then suddenly it says, you got a follow from JJ Redick. And I'm just like, what? Like, there's no way. And then I go in and look, and he's got the check mark, and then he responds, let's make it happen. And like, immediately I just went into full on freak out mode. Like, I can't believe that this is happening. And funny enough, so I got to interview him while he was in the NBA bubble last year. And, he got to detail what life was like in the bubble. He's got a young family and everything, and being away from them. He told me all about what it's like, how it was arriving there, some of the things that the players are struggling with. And so it was a really just a great interview overall. And I've stayed in touch with them since. And so it's just great being able to do that. As far as projects that I've got going on now, I've recently switched. I was originally just strictly basketball. I'm dipping my toe into other sports. I just finished an NFL draft discussion yesterday, and then recorded an episode tonight talking about the latest in the NBA. But the biggest thing for me was switching to doing live shows. I previously had done a lot of pre-recorded stuff. You go in, do some editing, put it out, and whatnot. But then a few months ago, I decided, I think it's time that I switch into the live shows. I think it's a lot more authentic compared to the finished product of having an edited podcast. I mean, I know I say and all this stuff like over and over and over, but I'd rather do that and stumble through it, I think, and have people see how I talk in everyday life compared to just, oh, well, I had to go through and edit like 100 things to take out all the ums. Like, that's just not something that I particularly want to do, and I've actually stopped doing since. But yeah, overall, just loving talking about other sports now, not just basketball strictly, because I found even just appearing on other people's shows talking about sports that aren't basketball, I do have a broad enough knowledge base that I don't think I realized I had in other sports. And so that's why I've kind of dipped my toes into other sports now.
Before we let people know where to find you, I find this interesting, you getting into these other sports, especially being up in Canada and talking about the NFL. And your sports fandom, I guess, is probably what I find most interesting, because when you're in Canada, you get to pick and choose. So I already found out you're a Duke basketball fan, right? You're a Cowboys fan. What else are you, and how did you come about picking some of those teams? Because right there, I can see why you became Duke basketball fan, because it was probably the only thing you could really see, national games that get picked up on TSN or something up there. And Cowboys games, I imagine, are kind of the same way.
Yeah, a lot of it is based off of, who's on the most. And I mean, even a lot of the teams that I follow come through my dad as well. So like he grew up, the way he got into basketball was watching the Lakers. Well, his Lakers were a lot different than mine. He had Showtime with Magic and Kareem, whereas mine was the Kobe and Shaq. Those are kind of the first games that I remember watching growing up. Now, one thing I didn't inherit from my dad, and it's probably a good thing, is being a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. But I actually, while I do live in Regina, Saskatchewan here, I grew up in Southern Ontario. So right in amongst, I was 2 hours from Toronto, half hour from Buffalo. So I was really in touch with a lot of the Toronto teams. And like, I went to a lot of Sabres games, I never actually got to go to a Bills game. I shouldn't say that. But at the time they were also 5-11 every single year. So I don't think I was really missing out on a lot of Buffalo Bills games when they were losing to the Patriots. But a lot of it is just based off of who's on TV the most. I mean, it's not tough to find a Cowboys game on TV. It doesn't matter if they're 0-16. The networks are going to find a way to have Jerry's team on TV. So I grew up a Detroit Red Wing fan. During that time, Detroit was one of the best hockey teams in the NHL. So, of course, they're on TV all the time. When you're watching the Stanley Cup Finals, who's in the Cup Final every year? It was Detroit. They're going through a rebuild now, but at the time, I grew up loving Brett Hull. He was a member of the Red Wings at the time. So I think I also identified with like a single player on a team. And then that's how I kind of grew to like the team itself. I loved watching Kobe. So of course, him being on the Lakers, that's how I was a Lakers fan. It's tough to pick a Cowboys player that I really liked during that time. Probably Tony Romo because he was running for his life. But so that for me, I think it's all based off of what you can actually catch in Canada. Like what we have now, obviously you have, NBA League Pass, you can get all that stuff now. But I mean, in the early 2000s, that wasn't the case. Like you couldn't stream games, you couldn't do a lot of the stuff that you do now. And so it was a lot tougher to find those games.
Having grown up in Colorado and being a very young, impressionable kid when the Nordiques made the move to Colorado, hearing that you're a Red Wings fan, it's been great talking to you, Ken. We appreciate you coming on to the podcast. But we will ask that you kindly find your exit. But I will tell you, they had the outdoor game at Coors Field a couple years back. It was the Avs and the Red Wings, and they had like the alumni game, I guess you would call it. And it was so much fun to see all of those old players, those old rivalries, seeing, a Stevie Y, and I tried to forget most of the Red Wings players, but to see, Peter Forsberg and Patrick Waugh and Joe Sakic and Adam Foote and Rob Blake and all those guys that played for the Avalanche during that time where those two were such heated rivals was so much fun. And it brought me – I was watching that alumni game. I was at work at the time and had it on. And I could not wipe the smile off my face watching that. It was so much fun. So while I can appreciate what the Red Wings were and what they meant to the Avs and to Avs fans during that time frame, I still hate them. So nothing has brought me more joy than watching them suck over the last couple of years.
And I mean, we had an outdoor game here in Regina back in October of 2019, and they thought that was a good idea. The NHL thought, yeah, let's bring an outdoor game to Regina, but the weather did not cooperate during that time because I want to say it was minus 35. Like it was insanely cold. And honestly, people started leaving midway through the third, and it was just they were so cold that like you couldn't even stand it at that point. And I mean, it was Winnipeg and Calgary. The game itself, I think it was 2-1. The ice conditions were tough, but the fiance just couldn't handle the cold, and neither could I. And we
don't blame you.
You just can't do it any longer.
35 below is real, and it sucks.
Yeah.
So let's get on. We'll get off of hockey. You and I could probably talk hockey for a long time here, but we'll focus on football if we can. Kevin's here.
Yeah, Kevin has made his arrival. Welcome in, Kevin. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm good. Sorry, guys, running a bit late with some other engagements, but I'm here now. I'm happy that Kenneth is with us. I'm happy to be talking about football. So all is right in the world.
Awesome. Well, Ken, before we hit up the Arizona Cardinals and start doing our Team of the Week breakdown, before we head over there, make sure that you plug your socials, let the listeners know where they can find you and connect with you.
Definitely. All my socials are at shooters_pod. Live shows Tuesday nights. Episodes drop Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. Put a lot of betting cards out, just a lot of unpopular opinions. I said the movie theater was overrated, and that seemed to drum up a lot of controversy on my Twitter.
You're not wrong.
I mean, I thought that I wasn't in the minority in that, but I got a lot of hate through that. So I think it's
the
just a lot
popcorn that makes the movie theater. Outside of that, I'm just as happy watching at home. I'm right there with you.
They sell that stuff in stores now.
Yeah, you can make it at home.
Yeah.
It's not as good. It's not as good. Anyway, I agree with you though. It's overrated.
Yeah. But yeah, you can find me on all socials at shooters_pod.
Awesome. So guys, if you haven't given him a follow, if you're not following him yet, make sure that you do. Very interesting follow, as you can gather so far through this conversation, and well worth it. So before we head on over to the Cardinals, which we're going to hit up the Team of the Week. We've also got the NFL news. We're going to give some draft reactions. We've got some trades to talk about. But before we get there, make sure that you're giving us a follow. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch at Good Old Boys FF, and the YouTube channel, the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast, and the website, goodoldboysff.com. Make sure you hit up all of those. Give us a follow. Give us a subscribe. We appreciate it. Thank you. So guys, let's go ahead and head on over to the Arizona Cardinals. And what we're looking for here is we're going to go through the teams. We're going to positional grouping, the breakdown. All of it is going to be both a little bit of a football reference, but as well as a fantasy reference there. Kind of giving your projections, where you're thinking your draft positions, things like that. So let's go ahead and start where we always do, and that is in the running back room. And they've got the newly acquired James Conner there, who finished as running back 26 last year, 169 rush attempts, 721 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns with 35 receptions on 43 targets for an additional 215 through the air. So guys, your thoughts on James Conner?
All right. I think he just got hurt again. That's my thought on James Conner. There's a small special place in my soul for James Conner because his rookie season, when Lev Bell set out and he played his rookie season,
Second year. It was his second year.
Yes.
Yes,
I apologize. But Lev Bell was teetering, right, and everything else. He was a guy I picked up in our home league in like the 20th round, because we have ridiculously deep benches. But he was a guy I picked up, and I rode his performance to a championship that year. And it was largely the value, right, that you got out of that. Now, outside of that, I tried to run it back the next year, and I got freaking handed to me in the playoffs because he missed half the season. So Conner is a good back when healthy. He is. He's versatile. He catches the ball pretty well. I'm not going to say he's like an elite pass catcher out of the backfield, but I do believe that he has soft hands and he can contribute in that way. He prefers to be a power back, but he can one cut and go. The power back function is probably what's caused a lot of his injuries, and causing him to miss time, whether it's a dinged up hamstring, he banged up his quad, he sprained an ankle. So these are all lower body injuries with James Conner, which scares me off of him a little bit. Now, the guy that we're going to be talking about here shortly actually has a higher ADP, which I am okay with. But Conner is a guy that I could see actually being more fantasy relevant by the end of the year because he'll get more of the goal line work. He's that thumper that'll be able to play in. He'll be able to help out in a bit PPR. So, it's kind of that old rule. In a split backfield, take the guy who costs less. Your value is greater. And so that's where I lean on James Conner. I can get him later on if I need a stopgap at running back, he's not a bad asset to have in your tool bag. You're just not going to be able to rely on him.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Connor is this will be the first time that he's playing kind of away from home. The kid, I mean, he grew up in Pennsylvania. He went to Pittsburgh. He got drafted by the Steelers. He spent 4 years there. So maybe a change of scenery after a couple of struggling years. After that 1 year, it was 2017, I believe. 2018, where he had 215 rush attempts. He had almost 1,000 yards. He had 12 touchdowns. And then he added almost 500 yards receiving on 55 catches and another score. So, like, if he could ever come close to that again, James Conner would be a pretty valuable back in this league. Problem is, I don't think that he ever does get back to those numbers again. I think those injuries, who was it? And I hate that I can't remember, but somebody said, I don't like the distinction of calling somebody injury prone. I think it's kind of lazy, but if the shoe fits, right? So with Connor,
he's health resistant. How about that?
There you go. Yeah, that's a good way. That's great. We should remember that one. But he hasn't had the production the last 2 seasons. He's had 100 less carries in 2019. He had 20 fewer catches, and the touchdowns were way down. In the last 2 seasons, he's had 10 touchdowns rushing combined. He had, or I guess here, let's do it this way. He had 13 touchdowns the last 2 seasons between receiving and rushing. He had 13 touchdowns in 2018. So, you're not seeing that same type of production, and the injuries do play a large part in that. Whether or not, and what remains to be seen, and something that I think we're all going to have to pay attention to if we're entertaining the idea of taking any of these Arizona running backs, is what the offense is going to look like down there with some of these faces in there. So I think it's something that we're going to have to keep our eye on during OTAs, maybe read some reports from Arizona reporters about how are the Cardinals planning on using him? If he does become that thumper, that goal line back, well, then his value shoots up a little bit. But, how often are the Cardinals finding themselves in goal line situations that, it isn't just a Kyler Murray naked boot or, toss it off to one of these big receivers that they have? How often are they running the football? That offense, that it's not really geared towards that. So we'll see how it works out. But Connor and Kevin, you're right. I think a lot of people do have a soft spot for him because he came through so well for those folks that had him in 2018, but he's just not the same anymore.
It's just the name value, I think. And the issue with it is people should temper their expectations if you're going to take James Conner. Like, that he's not going to play a full season likely. He hasn't done it his entire career. So saying that, if you're going to go and draft him, you have to be prepared for the fact that he's probably going to miss 4 or 5 weeks at some point in the season. So you can't go and get him as like your second running back and be like, oh, well, I'm loaded up at wide receiver. Okay, but you have James Conner. So what are you going to do when he goes down? Right? And so I agree. Like, I hate using the injury prone too, but if your entire career you haven't shown it that you can play a full season, then what leads you to believe that after all these injuries, he's suddenly just going to wake up and be like, yeah, I feel good. I'm fine. I'm going to play for 4 straight months. So I think you just have to be cautious taking him. I don't like the backfield in general in Arizona right now because I just think that Connor and Edmonds are a little bit similar in the way that they play, and I don't know who's going to get the bulk of the carries yet. I think it's one of those things where you have to wait until camp to see, you're going to get those bogus updates that say like, oh, this guy, he's seeing all these carries, and you kind of have to go through the weeds of those. But
yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
You're probably right there. However, looking at it, I think you'll see this thing really shake out to the point where Connor's probably first, second down back, and you bring in Edmonds as that third down, passing work type of back to it. And I think you guys make some very valid points there when you're talking about Kyler potentially vulturing some of these touchdowns, things like that. Like Kyler had 11 rushing touchdowns last year, and the majority of those were not on, these super deep long runs and breaks. They were a lot on what Alex was talking about, where you're talking like those naked bootlegs out and around. And so the touchdown side is going to be a little bit capped with James Conner this coming year. I don't think you're going to see him get a ton of PPR type of work, either, because of the fact that I think a lot of that's going to go to Chase Edmonds. But all of that being said, right now with James Conner, you can get him in a lot of drafts, looking even in the 5th, 6th round in a lot of cases. And there's some definite value for that in there, because if it's a team that I'm putting together, if it's a 6th round, like that's a 4th running back on my squad. And that's a deal where, now you've got some flex and you can really set your mark and play and play the matchup on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, Kyler did add to this, right, because of his scrambling ability, but the Cardinals were 6th in the NFL, or excuse me, 7th. 7th in the NFL in rushing last year. So they do run the ball. Now, like I said, Kyler adds to that, right? Because you got to figure there's about 60 yards per game that Kyler's adding in for. But even you take that 60 yards out, and it does take a big chunk away from their average, but they're still right in the middle of the pack for the NFL. So they are going to turn around and stick the ball in someone's chest. It's just a matter of, what type of value do you feel like you're getting on Chase Edmonds or James Conner? I feel like there's a lot of hype around Chase Edmonds right now, and we're going to get into that here in just a second, but that's what's fading me off of him. It's not – he's clearly not a workhorse back. Like, if you're leading with Chase Edmonds, you have to have a second guy. James Conner has at least proven that when he's on the field, he can play all 3 downs. It's just a matter of, are you going to get 10, 12, or 14 games out of him? You just don't know that.
Yeah, for me, that's why I would shy away. And what makes him so attractive now is that he's on a high-powered offense, right? Like he's going to be on an offense that's going to be moving the football. That's what Arizona does. But it just the headache of, will he or won't he be available for this week is too much for me.
And that's why I liked Derek's point of, if you're taking his draft strategy of round 6, he's my 4th back, I think there's great value there in James Conner. But if I only have, like, say I'm taking my 3rd back or even my 2nd back, if I've screwed up that royally, then, like, is James Conner really the guy you want to roll with, or do you want to maybe take a chance on a guy who's proven that he can play 14, 16 games?
Yeah, sit back and wait. You're better off taking Melvin Gordon and all the hype around Williams getting drafted to the Broncos. But at that point, you're better off taking Gordon, because at least he's healthy and he has a real good nose for the end zone, so you're getting that touchdown upside.
Yeah. Right. And that's why the Broncos brought him in there, was to be the goal line guy and get into the end zone. And he's proven that year over year over year. So yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and talk about the second back in that backfield, and that's Chase Edmonds. He finished as running back 28 last year, 97 rush attempts for 448 yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 53 receptions on 67 targets for 402 and 4 through the air. So, guys, your thoughts on Chase Edmonds?
I think if you're in full point PPR, you really like Chase Edmonds, because you know that he's guaranteed to get 3 or 4 catches in a game. Combined 850 rushing and receiving last year. And then, of course, is Conner going to stay healthy thing, I think, is also why he has so much upside, because if he does only play 10, 12 games, then you could have him in for the 1st and 2nd down for a few of those games. And I think that's where his value really lies.
Yeah, here's my problem with Chase Edmonds. Just in general, he's good at a lot of things, I don't find Chase Edmonds to be great at anything. He doesn't have great speed. He doesn't have great elusiveness. He doesn't have great hands, even though he does see those catches. That's true, but he doesn't have super soft hands. It's the scramble drill and flare out. Oh, here's the running back. It's not that he goes out on a wheel route and Kyler drops a dime on him 18 yards up the field and then he scampers for another 50 before someone shoelace tackles him. Like it's just he doesn't wow me, guys. Like, and it is what it is. Not everyone on your fantasy team needs to wow you. Not everyone in the NFL needs to wow you. But for where he's going in that 5th round, generally is where Chase Edmonds is kind of getting picked up now. I'm just not loving that. I think there's so much value at wide receiver there in that 5th round because everyone goes so running back heavy early. I'm very, very content picking up a Keenan Allen in the 5th round. And okay, now I have a top 12 wide receiver that I just picked up in the 5th round, as opposed to a guy who's going to finish, borderline RB2, RB3. Like it's the value game for me. So that's why I'm off of him.
Yeah, and I think, we haven't really seen him be kind of the guy, and I don't think he's going to be the guy this year either, but we kind of got a taste of it after, Drake leaving and all that business down there in Arizona. But, he hasn't had a season with over 100 rush attempts yet. He's 60, and then last year he had 97. And, I'd like to see a little bit more consistency. Obviously, last year was his best year, but a little bit more consistency and maybe find the end zone, a couple more times. That would be nice, at least on the ground. Through the air is fine. 4 touchdowns receiving for a running back, not too shabby. But if he can find the end zone a little bit more, then, he kind of shoots up that RB2 category a little bit more. But you're right, Kevin. He's fringe RB2, RB3 if he puts together that year. Derek, I'm interested in probably a little game that we can play here of which running back do we think finishes higher, in fantasy scoring. Will it be Chase Edmonds or will it be James Conner? Because they finished pretty much right next to each other last year. Is that what we're going to see for this year?
No, I think that you'll see Conner outpace Edmonds for fantasy purposes this year. A lot of that has to do with the fact that I think that he's going to get more opportunity. And when you're talking to me about a running back that I want on my team, I want the guy that's going to get the opportunity and get the touches. And I think from a carry workload, you'll see Conner right around about 200 touches. You maybe see Edmonds right around about 100. And then when you play that thing through on the receiving side of it, I think Connor's still going to get probably 30 receptions out of this thing. Whereas even if Edmonds is being the receiving back out of the backfield, he's probably only going to see 60 receptions. So I'm going to take James Conner on that one.
I would take James Conner as well to finish higher. I think Drake also isn't as good of a catching back necessarily as Conner is. And obviously he's no longer there, but I think that's going to play a bit of a factor in this as well, is the fact that, Drake wasn't getting the catches, so they were putting Edmonds in on more plays. But if you have Conner who can do that as well, then is he necessarily going to see the field as much as well?
Yeah, I'll make it a clean sweep. I see Conner finishing. I see Conner finishing somewhere between RB 20 and 24. I think RB 15 is a amazing season for James Conner, but I think that's definitely his cap. I don't see him in RB1 territory, but somewhere in that 20 to 24 range is where I realistically see him fitting. And a lot of that's going to be the touchdowns, guys. Like the work that Kenyon Drake had in Arizona is mostly going to go to James Conner as long as he can stay on the field. And that's the thing. Like we can't predict injury, you never know. But provided James Conner is on the field, he's going to see 90% of what Kenyon Drake's workload was in the running game and probably more in the passing game to balance everything out there. So Conner is my call.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
All righty. So definitely a clean sweep throughout that. Any final thoughts on Chase Edmonds? All right. Any desire to talk about Eno Benjamin for the Cardinals next year?
Actually, I will go back. If you think that drafting Chase Edmonds in front of James Conner is a good idea, no.
Everybody, dude.
I know.
Every single
It's crazy.
draft that I've been a part of, whether it's been mock or dynasty or redraft, Edmonds is going 2 rounds in front of Connor. Every single one. And I just sit back and wait.
Yeah.
I think they just saw the spike in his carries last year, and they think, oh, well, he's going to exceed that once again. And it's like, but sometimes guys don't do that. Like, that could have just been his career year, and you can't just think, well, he's going to go and get 125 carries this year. Like, is he, though, when you have James Conner there? No.
We all thought that James Conner would be able to back up that season, and he hasn't yet. So,
yeah.
I think there's a lot of the same thinking.
And Edmonds had a game without Drake, right? Drake was injured for 1 game last year. Edmonds was the guy. He had 25 carries for 78 yards. And it was against the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins are not juggernauts on defense, but they are very respectable on defense for sure. So it wasn't a cupcake matchup necessarily, but 25 carries, 22, 23, whatever it was, carries for 78 yards. That is not a guy that I'm necessarily loving. Like, there is zero pop in that performance whatsoever.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I think we'll go ahead and move on over to the wide receiver room then. You had DeAndre Hopkins coming over from the Texans last year, and there was a lot of folks out there last year going into it that were buying into the narrative that wide receivers struggle going to a new team in the first season. And, DeAndre Hopkins definitely did not buy into that narrative, where he finished as the wide receiver 5 on the year, 115 receptions on 160 targets, 1,407 yards, 6 touchdowns. Your thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins?
I love D-Hop. I love Nuke. There's nothing to dislike about the guy. He's aggressive he's aggressive with the ball. He loves to fight with cornerbacks. Like, he can high point it. He can go long. He runs short routes, crisp short routes to get separation. Like, the only thing I'd like to see is Kyler find him a little bit more in the red zone. Like, Nuke Hopkins is too good to only have 6 touchdowns. Like, and down year, new offense. Okay, fine. Maybe that's where it played in. But this guy is absolutely elite. Like, he is arguably the first or second best, wide receiver in the NFL, right? It's a pretty short list up top. And then you have a whole bunch of guys. But Devonta Adams, Hopkins. Some people want to argue Tyreek. Tyreek is not this guy. It's a whole different thing. Where an offensive built around speed, and yes, that plays into it. But as far as wide receiver skill set, he's absolutely top 2. He's only 28 years old, guys. So we got, at least another 3 years of dominance is what I'm thinking. If not, maybe a little longer if he's able to take care of himself. So, feel free to take him in the first round of your draft if you're not going running back. And if you do go running back and you can snatch him up in the second, kudos to you, because Nuke Hopkins is the real deal.
Hopefully he took some lessons from Larry Fitzgerald on longevity and how to stick around for a while, because it would be nice to see him have the same kind of career length and longevity, at least. But Kevin, you said, down year last year. It actually kind of wasn't. Only in the touchdowns was it kind of a down year. He tied his career best with 115 catches, and it was the second most receiving yards he's had in a single season. So really, what it boils down to is Kyler Murray needs to get him the football when they're in the red zone, and that's the difference between what would have been a really good, probably a career year. And, a year where it was a little disappointing because he couldn't get in the end zone. He only got in the end zone 6 times. So if he can get more of those touchdowns, then yeah, he's absolutely, and even if he doesn't, I mean, if you're still going to get 115 catches and 1,500 yards out of it, that's good. You're going to like that. But the touchdowns are going to make that a heck of a lot more attractive and a heck of a lot better, that you feel comfortable taking that first round pick on DeAndre Hopkins. But that's what remains to be seen, is that can they get him the ball a little bit more while he's in the paint?
Yeah, I mean, I love D-Hop. The fact that he was in the second round last year, I think I took him in every league. He won me a league. I've got his jersey hanging in my basement now because of it. I mean, I'm a big D-Hop guy. I think he's going to be the best wide receiver this year, if not top 3. I agree 100% on if you're especially later in the first round and you want to go wide receiver. I think it's just a safe pick. Like Kevin talked about the route running and everything that he can do. He can catch the deep ball. Like he's just the total package when it comes to a wide receiver. You're not like the thing with a guy like Tyreek is you're like, well, I hope he catches a 60-yard bomb today. Whereas D-Hop, you're like, well, he's going to get 10 targets today. So he's going to get like 7 catches for 80 or 90 yards. If he gets a touchdown, great. And then I had a really good week out of D-Hop. Like I was never worried about him even going into like top corner matchups. I just think he's that good of a route runner that he can overcome stuff like that. So I think he's going to figure out the touchdowns as well. We talked about Kyler running a lot of those bootlegs in the red zone or close to the red zone. And I think this year he's going to find D-Hop a lot more in the end zone. And I think a big part of that is also the fact that they added a couple more weapons. So it's a lot tougher for defenses to key in on D-Hop in the red zone.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's one of those that when you look at his red zone targets, he only got one of those 6 touchdowns inside the red zone. The rest of those were, 20+ yard touchdown runs or catches, I should say. So the one thing that was a little disappointing for D-Hop last year was kind of that back half finish, where he was really good in weeks 14 and 15, but that back half was not necessarily as good as you would have hoped. And that was part of the stretch that the Cardinals ended up going through and losing, I believe 5 of 7 games down the stretch to finish the season off. So hopefully this season we'll see just a more dominant performance throughout the entire season. See a little bit more consistency throughout the back half is what he showed this through the front half this year. And I think that'll come a little bit where you saw some teams start getting some tape on that thing and start making the adjustments in the second half as far as how that was going to look and work. So I think you'll see them scheme him in more so, especially inside the red zone. So I would look for a similar workload from a receptions, from a yardage type of deal. But I think you'll see the touchdowns uptick, probably 2, 3, maybe even 4 to get him to double-digit touchdowns through the air, which at that point, you're talking, he's competing very heavily for wide receiver 1 on the season. And that's where he can absolutely finish as far as the ceiling goes. So, guys, let's go ahead and move on over to A.J. Green, newly acquired from the Bengals, finished at 67 ranking last year, 47 receptions, 104 targets, 523 and 2 through the air. Thoughts on A.J. Green?
I really don't know why the Cardinals made this particular move with some of the wide receivers that were available in free agency. But it's a guy, I want to say veteran presence, but heck, you have that with Hopkins. Like, he's an 8-year pro. So I'm not quite sure, guys. Like, I don't know what role AJ Green fills for them. He's a guy who's drastically underperformed each of the last 4 seasons. He's lost more than a step just because of the leg injuries that he's had. And believe me, it hurts to say this. I love AJ Green. He's a dog. I mean, I've been watching AJ Green for years and years and years now, and he's not even a number 2 at this point. Like, I'm just baffled by this. Like, 50, 60 catches, maybe, call it 530 yards, maybe 3 touchdowns. Like, I just don't know that AJ Green, it's tough because of the name associated with it in my mind, I guess, right? Because you can take that stat line and apply it to 50 other receivers, and you don't know who they are, but this guy sticks out because he, once was the best of the best the NFL had to offer.
I mean, that's a lot of targets for not a lot of production last year too. Like 104 targets for AJ, and you finish with 500 yards. I agree with you, Kevin. Like, I don't know why AJ's there. Like, Fitz kind of plays the veteran role. You've got D-Hop, Christian Kirk still relevant. You went and drafted wide receiver too. Like, it just, I don't see why they really needed AJ Green. I don't know. I agree with you. I don't know what his role is going to be in this offense. He wasn't a touchdown guy last year. He only had 2, so I'm a little bit baffled by it as well. I wouldn't even know where to begin with drafting him.
You don't.
And I think that's going to be the question that a lot of people are going to be faced with is, will the name recognition alone get him picked up? And, I don't know that he necessarily at this present time, as we're talking about it, and obviously we haven't seen OTAs, we haven't seen anything that's, come out of Arizona, but at this present time, it is just so weird and baffling why AJ Green is a member of the Arizona Cardinals, and in a room that they didn't really need somebody of his skill set, his experience, and what he brings to the table. I'm not exactly sure on this one. And maybe it's a resurgence. Maybe, he gets out of Cincinnati, which has been kind of a black hole of success the last couple years. And he finds some greener grass, pardon the pun, in Arizona, and it works out. But I'm not sure with everything else that they have going on. This kind of feels like the Cowboys, where you're like, okay, they've got too many options to throw to, and that, the pie is only so big. And so those pieces are only going to be so big. How big of a piece is AJ Green going to get? And I just don't know that it's going to be one that's going to be worth taking a fantasy draft pick on.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that, the only reason that I could potentially see them doing this, and I think it's even still a stretch at that point, is the fact that you bring in a guy that from a name value, you've got to, name value wise, you've got to try and scheme around a little bit, but I don't think that's the case anymore. And defensive coordinators are smart enough to realize that. So I like I said, from that standpoint, it doesn't make sense to me. And when you look at the fact that from just a pure numbers standpoint, statistical type of look there, Chase Edmonds didn't have much different production than AJ Green had in the receiving game last year. I mean, there's about 6 receptions and about 100 yards difference there, but from a pure, statistical output there's not much difference between the two. So leaves me scratching my head as to why they make this move, as well as the fact that they've still got a bunch of other receivers that we'll talk about here, such as Larry Fitzgerald, who finished wide receiver 87 last year, 54 receptions, 72 targets, 409 yards, 1 touchdown. Any thoughts on Larry Fitz?
He is playing next year, right? Like he said that he's yeah, we do that every year with Fitz.
We haven't seen the retirement come through yet.
Is this it? Is this his swan song yet? Again, I think Fitzgerald is a guy that you don't. He holds a soft spot, I think, in a lot of people's heart, just because he's been doing it for so long and he's done it the right way. And you want to talk about a guy that is just what you would want your kids to grow up to be, right? Like Larry Fitzgerald is that person. And so yes, he's a good human, but for fantasy football purposes, he's not extremely relevant.
Like, not to sound disrespectful, but like hang him up, like not just from like a playing standpoint, but a fantasy standpoint too. Like, I mean, it sucks to see him only get 400 yards last year, and I don't know. I just don't see him being a guy that I don't even look at him from a streaming option. Like, oh, this would be a good pick this week. Like, because even if he gets a touchdown, it's like 2 catches for 15 and a TD. It feels like that would be his game. And then it's like, okay, well, I feel like there's better options out there then that I could potentially get like 4 catches for 40 and a TD. And I just don't see that from Larry.
Yeah, I expect him to retire. Like as Derek said, the announcement hasn't been made. We haven't been able to, tell him officially thank you for your years of service, and Walter Payton Man of the Year award winner, all the great things he's done with promoting these athletes and kids in general to go back in school, get your degree.
Yeah.
I mean, all the things that he does as a humanitarian. He's just a great individual, as Alex alluded to, but he's more of a coach than anything, right? Like, they're paying him, and they paid him last year to essentially be a coach, to coach up Andy Isabella, to coach up Butler, to basically let Nuke do his thing and focus on being the best receiver he can be, and I'll coach all these young guys, and it'll work out. And so if that's the role they have for him again, so be it. Like, there's nothing wrong with having an extra coach out there, especially a guy who can say, hey, I've done these things. I've won a Super Bowl. I participated in a Super Bowl. I spent my entire career here. Like, again, all the good humanitarian things, but from a football output view, just, tell him thank you, but ignore him and let his name pass by.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. They've still got a ton of receivers down there. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Kingsbury can't go into the draft and go, ooh, I really like that small receiver. We got to draft him. But a lot of guys out there, Christian Kirk being one of them. Any desire to talk about Christian Kirk, or if you guys think he has any fantasy relevance for this coming year?
I want Kirk to be relevant, but he just quite hadn't cracked that code, right? Like, he was supposed to be the wingman, like, to Fitz and then to Hopkins, and it just hasn't quite come to be. He fought some injuries, but him and Kyler just haven't quite connected. So he's only 24 years old, so there's still some hope there, but he's not a guy I'm investing significant fantasy capital into. If he falls to me and I'm looking for some depth, okay, I might snatch him up if I'm stuck with, him or an aging veteran that's on the decline. Like, at least Kirk provides some upside because he has speed still, and he plays an offense that likes to sling it. Like, that's the rationale behind why I would draft him.
So I will tell you the one thing that you need to keep in mind if you're going to consider Christian Kirk this year, and that is, it's a contract year. He is in the final year of his rookie deal, the 4th year of his rookie deal. I don't know. I don't think second rounders get the fifth year option. I'm not sure that that's it. So he's in a contract year. So this is a very important season for him. Now, if you believe that Kyler Murray is going to somehow find him the football with all of these other options now that the Cardinals have, then he might be worth picking up late. But at the same time, there's, like I said earlier, the pie is only so big. And what slice of the pie is Christian Kirk going to get? And right now, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be that big of a piece of the pie.
I think Christian Kirk is a depth piece, like you pointed out. I would draft Christian Kirk as like my 6th or 7th wide receiver to save myself from drafting AJ Green. Because, it's honestly,
that's a great point.
Because you would get to those 2 names and then you'd be like, AJ Green name value. And then you're like, no, Kirk has a bit more upside potential here. And then I would just take him to sit on my bench probably drop him by like week 3.
Yeah, when you looked at it, he had 3 really good weeks last year where he finished his wide receiver 3, 12, and 11, and then the rest of the weeks didn't crack the top 24. But I see his role on this team basically coming in to spell AJ Green out there on the outside, at which point he'll probably get a deep ball shot or 2 throughout the game there. And if he connects on one of those and you manage to, play that thing right, you'll get that big play upside there. But he's an interesting name that could be out there for like a best ball type of thing as a very late round flyer. Like that might be something worth keeping an eye on. But redraft dynasty, I think I'm out on old Christian Kirk at this point. So they've got Andy Isabella, and I don't know that outside of special teams we're going to see him much. And they just drafted Rondale Moore, the speedster out of Purdue. Any thoughts on Rondale Moore?
I'm very interested to see how Cliff decides to use him. Rondale Moore is that speedster, so you think jet sweeps, you think kind of, some gadgetry stuff. Sitting here and kind of thinking through scenarios through my head, he might actually take carries away from Connor and Edmonds, right? Like he's only 5'9", so you kind of get him on a quick toss or something, so that way you can get him outside and up the field a little bit. Like maybe they use him in the passing game for some of those route concepts as opposed to either one of the running backs. It's going to be interesting to find his niche, guys. Like I'm afraid that he's going to get crushed playing in that division because you have the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Niners. And those linebacking cores in general love to bend your face mask in. And so I'm afraid you stick 160 pounds on a 5'9" frame running across the middle. And he may not live to see the end of the season. That is my ultimate worry about Rondale Moore is I don't know if his body is just physically made to take the abuse of an NFL season.
Here's what concerns me more than just his physical attributes, which should cause for concern. They're going to have a package for him. That's how I see this all playing out. Is that Cliff Kingsbury, the ego that is all football coaches really. But the ego that is Cliff Kingsbury is going to develop a package for Rondale Moore. And the problem with packages for specific guys is that they rarely work and they're rarely consistent. I think the only guy who's really broken that mold, and I think it was early on, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Tyreek had like a package to start off. And then, obviously he became Tyreek Hill. Am I correct in that? No?
Yes and no. Tyreek's body's it is completely different. Like Tyreek is 5'11" and 210 and runs like a cheetah. Rondale Moore is 2 inches shorter and 40 pounds lighter. Like it's a lot of mass that you're missing to take any sort of abuse.
So, but that's what these gadget plays that will be involved for a Rondale Moore type. It's easy for defenses to key in on and see like, oh, Rondale Moore's out there. Like we should probably pay attention to wherever he is because there's probably a play coming for him. So his options are specific package or decoy. And that doesn't really work for fantasy purposes. You need somebody who's getting volume. You need somebody who's going to see the football come their way more than, the 3 or 4 plays that they have gadget, drawn up for him in his Rondale Moore package, or, him being a decoy where he's not even going to see the ball. He's just eye candy for the defense. So that to me is the biggest concern about Rondale Moore. Now, he could go out and prove me wrong, and he could, turn into a sneaky slot receiver. But that's just what this screams to me, is that there will be a Rondale Moore package, and for fantasy purposes, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, for when I saw this one and I saw his name get called, I literally just had the thought to myself that Cliff Kingsbury cannot help himself but taking a very fast, speedy wide receiver. And it just reminds me of all those Texas Tech days when you'd see those, these smaller receivers that are lightning quick roll out there and go. And that was just very reminiscent of that. And I think for fantasy, I'm staying away. The
problem with that is there's not defenses like Kansas or at least, prior to these last couple of years. Iowa State, you don't get those defenses in the NFL week in and week out. You're playing real defenses, and especially in that division. And so you can get away with having the speedster where you're just going to blow by because you got better athletes. That's not really the case in the NFL. So hopefully Kingsbury has wised up in his few years. Otherwise, his seat is warming up, and if this season goes awry, it's going to be hot.
You very well may be right. Guys, Arizona does not utilize the tight end much, but do you have any desire to talk about Maxx Williams?
He's a stream if you're that desperate.
Okay. So let's go ahead and move on over to the quarterback room. And Kyler Murray is sitting over there in the QB room, finished as QB2 last year, 375 completions on 558 attempts, 3,971 yards, 26 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He had 133 rush attempts for 819 yards and 11 TDs on the ground. Guys, your thoughts on Kyler Murray?
Didn't disappoint based off of where his ADP was last year. I think a lot of people were skeptical to see him as high as he was. But I mean, I wasn't. Like, it seemed like if you have a QB that is going to get you 40, 50 yards on the ground, but can also throw the football, I mean, there's a ton of upside there from a fantasy perspective. Throw in the fact he added one of the top 3 wide receivers in the NFL in DeAndre Hopkins too. It seemed like a recipe for success with him. And I mean, he proved it. And I mean, he's only going into year 3. So nothing says he can't get better than what he put out last year.
Yeah, Kyler's any way you want to spin it, Kyler is a top 3 NFL quarterback right now, right? You have Mahomes, you have Kyler, and then a lot of people have put Josh Allen in that category right now based off the season that Allen had last year, also with his legs contributing to that. The thing with Kyler is he truly wants to throw the ball first. Like, he will run. He is elusive enough to get out of the way, get upfield, and get those yards. But he's not looking to run. Like, he absolutely goes through his progressions. And maybe that's where he needs to improve slightly, right, is getting to that kind of that 4th progression before he takes off. But you can watch the film, and he gets through his first 3 reads, which is a hell of a lot better than Jared Goff can do. And not that they're the same guy at all, but I mean, you have pocket quarterbacks, I guess is my point, who won't get through 3 reads before they throw it away or take a sack. Kyler does that. He's electric. He's fun to watch. He's one of those guys that's fun to have on your fantasy football team, because no matter how bad your week might look at one point, Kyler can turn that around in a heartbeat, and he can turn around and run for 100 yards, score 2 touchdowns on the ground, throw 3 through the air for another 270 yards. And holy crap, my quarterback just scored 35 to 40 points in a week, and I just turned around and took a loss into a narrow victory. That's fun, guys. That's why you play fantasy football, is to watch that crap. So I absolutely love Kyler. He's absolutely entertaining. I don't love taking quarterbacks early in single quarterback leagues, but he is a guy that I do keep an eye out for to see if he falls just a little bit and it happens to be right in my lap. I will change my game plan mid-draft, or I guess at the beginning of the draft, if you will, to snatch him up, and then I will figure the rest out to have a top 3 quarterback like that.
He's just a walking point machine for fantasy football. And right, the name of the game is to score more points than the other guy. You don't get to play defense against them. So all you can do is hope for a good offense, and that's what Kyler Murray provides. So, yeah, I don't see him falling off another year, perhaps a full off season with his guys. I just see that, as nervous as I am with, some of the other pieces on this offense, not nervous at all about Kyler Murray.
No, and Kevin, I liked your point about, I don't like taking QB early either, but the 2 guys that I would watch for would be Mahomes and Kyler. And it's just, I mean, I had Mahomes in multiple leagues last year. He can, you think you're dead in the water. He goes and throws 450, 5 touchdowns, then you're like, oh, sweet, I'm back in it, or I'm leading now. And I think Kyler's ability, especially on the ground, like you pointed out, the 2 rushing TDs, throws for a couple. You don't get that from Lamar. It would basically be all on the ground. You get the fact that he can also pass for 250, and I think that's his upside, is that he might be able to steal you a week or two when other players aren't performing, and I think that's why his ADP is going to be as high as it is. If I was drafting, 3rd round, and I maybe got my 2 running backs and I see Kyler there, it's something that I'm thinking about. Like, I don't love taking QB early, but if I get Kyler freaking Murray, then I don't have to worry about drafting another QB. Like, his bye week, I'll stream somebody, and the rest of the weeks it's Kyler, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could put a solid draft plan in the place like that, right? You could go 2 RBs if you land on a Kyler, and that's the guy that you want to take, snatch him up the 3rd. And like I said earlier, there's a ton of wide receiver value rounds 4 through 6. So you won't be sitting in a bad spot. You can still land on guys who are absolutely going to produce, and produce very well for where you're drafting them. So that is a draft strategy I can sign off on.
That's definitely one. Okay. I'm actually pretty proud of us. We made it all the way through an hour tonight before. So whoever had the over under on that one through the first half, you lost. So unless you had the under, of course. But the looking at Kyler, if you'd listened to this podcast last year as we were going through the rankings, you would have known that he was going to finish as quarterback 2. At least if you listen to me on this one, because I called it. Just little humble brag, humble flex there. But Kyler did exactly what we thought he was going to do. He was going to come out. He was going to throw the ball. He was going to move it through the air, and he was going to get enough run room in order to do very well. Like, his floor is absolutely there, but his ceiling is also through the roof as well, because he gives you that arm talent as well. So, quick little fun fact stat for you. There's only been 3 quarterbacks in the last, there's only been 1 quarterback in the last 3 years that finished outside of the top 10 when it came to quarterbacks that rushed the ball 100 or more times in a game. And that was Cam Newton. And I think you'll see Kyler very easily get at 100-yard rushing or 100 rush attempt mark again. And with that upside of his arm, you'll see him easily, I'm going to call it probably QB3 this year is about where I'm going to see him finish on this one. So absolutely 3rd round in a single QB. I'm going to go that way, but in a super flex, I'm probably not going to wait around. I'll probably pick him up in the 1st on a super flex. So, but yeah, guys, any other thoughts on the Cardinals or Kyler Murray?
No, they're a fun team to watch. You know, there's a couple pieces that you do want, right? Nuke, Kyler, Connor, Edmonds, if they fall to you late and you're not depending on them to start week in and week out for you. But if nothing else, they're fun because you never quite know what Cliff's going to come up with and if they're going to throw it 80 times in a game.
It's just a fun division as a whole. I mean, it's competitive top to bottom. I tune in any week that those teams are playing each other. And I mean, Arizona's a big reason why, as I said, I'm a big D-Hop guy. And I mean, Kyler's electric to watch as well. So great team to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ken, I know that you've got to get running there, but before we let you go, why don't you make sure that you let the listeners know how they can connect with you?
Definitely. Before I sign off, Alex, Kevin, Derek, it's a pleasure sitting down with you guys and being able to chat fantasy football. Hope we can do it again sometime soon. You can follow me on all social platforms at shooters_pod. Episode drops tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time. And thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Ken,
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for stopping by.
So, all righty, guys. The fun continues. We've got a few more things to rock and roll through. And we're going to start off with the NFL news. And there's some interesting stuff brewing out there from the last time we talked last week. Aaron Rodgers is upset with the Packers. If you hadn't been following along, there's some reports coming out today that the Broncos are trying to make a very strong push to acquire Rodgers. The Packers are saying that they're not trading him. Offensive tackle Alejandro Villanueva signed with the Ravens, a 2-year, $14 million deal. Tim Tebow's back in the news, and he worked out with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Broncos release Jeff Driscoll. Left tackle Charles Leno was released by the Bears. The Falcons pick up Calvin Ridley's 5th-year option. The Panthers pick up Sam Darnold's 5th-year option. The Falcons decline the 5th-year option on Hayden Hurst. The Chiefs sign Jerick McKinnon, and the Ravens pick up the 5th-year option on Lamar Jackson. So, guys, your thoughts on the news?
All right, let's just get to the one that matters the most. Clearly,
the big elephant in the room?
What's that?
You mean the big elephant in the room?
Yeah, with the Broncos releasing Jeff Driscoll, that frees up a spot at quarterback. No, I'm kidding. That has nothing to do with what they want to do. I am getting less and less in the camp of Aaron Rodgers coming to Denver, as I was, say, last Thursday when all this started to boil over. But I still am hoping that it happens because, oh my gosh, would that be so much fun for Broncos fans, for the NFL, really, to just see the giant FU tour that Aaron Rodgers goes on. That would be just a very fun one. So I'm 50-50 right now that he is in Green Bay at the start of the season. I'm 50-50, and I think that's like pretty wild, actually, to be at 50-50 at this point. And that's not to say that, I mean, up until Thursday, guys, there was no talk about Aaron Rodgers ever leaving the Green Bay Packers. I mean, there was rumblings, right? He was pretty upset last year, but that he would actually come out and say something and let people know, like, that he is disgruntled and actually wants out. That to me is pretty crazy. So I'm hoping that if he does get out of Green Bay, he finds himself in Denver, and that the idea that I pitched out there on Thursday after the Broncos made their pick of Patrick Surtain was that they were drafting with a trade partner in mind, and that Aaron Rodgers would be in the old orange and blue.
I sure hope this happens because I was really frustrated with the Broncos pick of Patrick Surtain. And don't get me wrong, I like Patrick Surtain, the player. This is not about the player and his ability, okay? This is about the Denver Broncos taking a player in that position, meaning the secondary, at that point in the draft, meaning 9th overall, when you had the field general for your offense and the field general for your defense on the board staring you right in the face. And one was Micah Parsons, the other was Justin Fields. And the Broncos let both of them walk through the door. Now, I hope at some point you kind of get to hear the rumblings behind the curtain, right? I want to know Vic Fangio got overruled. I want to know that Vic Fangio pounded the table for his guy and got told to sit down and go in the corner. Because if not, I want him out of town. It's that simple. I like Patrick Surtain. I think he's going to be a very good pro. This isn't about his ability, guys. This is about the fact that the Denver Broncos have not had a middle linebacker for the better part of 10 years now, because Brandon Marshall and Danny Trevathan weren't the answer either, guys. We're going all the way back to the Al Wilson days. So really, we're talking 20 years ago, the last time the Broncos had a reliable 3-down thumper in the middle to stop the pain, and Micah Parsons was that guy. He was the best middle linebacker to come out of college since Roquan, who I also wanted the Broncos to draft, but the Bears were in front of us that year. So I've come to find out that the Bears draft a lot of these guys that I think the Broncos should get. I might have to switch to be a damn Bears fan to at least support the guys I'm pounding the table for here, but I'm getting off on a tangent. All this goes away if the Broncos get Aaron Rodgers. all the frustration and all the sins of the first round of the draft go away, because this team has the offensive and defensive talent to contend right now. They don't have a quarterback. But if you stick Aaron Rodgers in that lineup, this lineup that the Broncos have from top to bottom is arguably better than any lineup Peyton Manning had when he was in Denver. Arguably. Yeah. You can go line for line, right? The secondary might be a little better on the Peyton teams, right? With the no-fly zone. But our receiving core is better.
Yeah.
The receiving core they currently have is better, with Noah Fant and Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and Deshaun Hamilton and Tim Patrick being able to fill in like he did last year. Like the running game is better. Like we are better now with Devonta Williams and Melvin Gordon than we were with CJ Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
So tit for tat, but I'd argue better. So I hope this happens. I hope the Broncos give up their first next year and whatever else they want. You want Bradley Chubb? Take Bradley Chubb. I don't care. Do you want Patrick Surtain? Here's Patrick Surtain too. Have all three. Bring Aaron Rodgers in, and we are still better off. And we go from a borderline 8-8 team again to a 12-win team overnight. Aaron Rodgers will give you 4 wins on his own. So that takes us from 8-8 to
8-9 this year.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
We'll make it. It'll be the 9. The 9 will be in the loss column.
Fair. But so that's my rant about that is this needs to happen for my fandom here. Like, not only does it make sense logistically, but just for my fandom, like, Broncos, hear my plea. Like, do something to make me want to come to the stadium, because running Von Miller out there and pumping him as the face of the franchise isn't working anymore. That was a play that worked 5 years ago after a Super Bowl MVP. It's not working now. Like, do something to make me want to come back once the stadium opens up, and let me enjoy the game.
What I think that the Broncos, and I hope that, you know, with John Elway still being there in the front office, what I hope is that he can understand that Broncos fans will forgive all manner of sins if you can get another Super Bowl in there. You can decimate a franchise for a couple years if you can just bring us one more ring. You know, look, that's all we're after. We just want another ring, you know, or even to get us to there and make us respectable again. But you can give up next year's first, the year after's first, because you're going to still have 3 or 4 years with Aaron Rodgers. And that's going to be an area where you'll be okay. Plus, not to mention, it's freaking Denver, and you have Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback. That's going to be attractive to free agents. So you're going to be able to bring in, you know, guys to hide some of those missing draft picks. That is what I hope the Broncos are keeping in mind here. Now, all of it really depends on, will Green Bay actually listen to Aaron Rodgers? Will they actually move off on him? Because I think, you know, if Denver's going to make a push for him, I think it'll be attractive. It's just a matter of, it'll come down to Green Bay and their front office.
Yeah. And we got a comment down there from our boy, and Aaron Rodgers just unhappy with the Packers and kind of how they've managed some things. And yeah, there's some contract issues at play there. There's some
there's two things that have really, really set this in motion. And one was last year, the Packers weren't in the first round, and then they traded up and they picked Jordan Love. So essentially, they traded up into the first round to get Aaron Rodgers' replacement, while Aaron Rodgers has said, hey, I'm bringing this team along, and I've got no help. I have Devontae Adams, and I have his name is escaping me at the moment, the running back, Aaron Jones. Thank you. I have Aaron Jones. But beyond that, I've got scrubs that I'm working with, and we're still competing for NFC championships year in and year out. We're still competing for Super Bowl berths. That is why Aaron Rodgers said, look, I can get the window. Aaron Rodgers recognizes the curtain on his career is closing, and he wants to get back to a Super Bowl. It's been, how long has it been since the Packers won the Super Bowl, guys? It was 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Just about.
Yeah. So it has been 10 years, and Rodgers would like to get a taste of that again. So that was kind of the catalyst of things. And all he did last year was turn in an MVP performance. And I maintain that a pissed off Aaron Rodgers is not somebody you want to come across, because that's what he'll do. I think I was saying that last offseason after they drafted, about this time last year when they drafted Jordan Love. It was watch out. And what did he do? He went and turned in an MVP performance throughout the course of the season. So to me, it happened again this year, and he's not being included in some of these conversations. And I think as a franchise quarterback, you've earned the right to at least be included in the conversation. You don't get the opportunity to say, hey, go draft this guy, but you at least have earned the right to be included in the conversation. And that's not what Green Bay is doing. I heard it on the radio today. I think it was Cowherd's show, or maybe it was Dan Patrick's show. But, it's not that the player should be making personnel decisions, but he should at least be, kept up on them. He found out about the Packers trading up and then drafting Jordan Love like we all did, by sitting on his couch last year. He was enjoying a beverage, as he's famously told whoever will listen. He found out the same way we did. He wasn't even given, a heads up. Hey, we're thinking about doing this. He had no idea. So to be blindsided by your employer like that, and this is it. This is the other thing too. And I know, people will be like, oh, he makes millions of dollars. How can you be so, act like a diva, if you will? It's okay to be upset with your employer. Sometimes you get screwed over by your employer and you don't get appreciated and you get undervalued. That's what's happening here. And when that happens, what do? Well, you can keep going to work and hate where you work, or you can try to find something different. It's a little different because, contracts, but that's what he's doing here. So if Denver can do it, and it appears that the reports are like Denver's really the only team that's like doing anything here with this, right? I haven't seen really anybody else that's been kind of linked with this.
So San Francisco was the day of the draft. There's reports out there that, so Shanahan apparently made a call to LaFleur to see kind of what was going on there, and was very quickly told that he wasn't on the table for trades. It sounded like San Francisco made an offer there and were very quickly turned down. Aaron Rodgers has put together a list of teams out there, which I saw now: the Raiders, the Broncos, and I forget the third team that was on.
I think the Niners were it, because Northern California, that's where he's from. Right.
So that's kind of how that all came to play. But, kind of shifting gears here, just real quick. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on some of the things that Terry Bradshaw came out and was saying over the last couple of days about, Aaron Rodgers needs, if he just wants to retire, then he needs to do it, and he needs to quit talking about it and go host Jeopardy. And I don't know if you guys had seen that yet.
I had heard that he had made some comments, and all I can say to Terry Bradshaw is shut the hell up. You have no idea. It's such a different business and it's become a business, or has taken on more business-like characteristics since Terry Bradshaw was in the league 30 years ago, 40 years ago, however long it was.
70s.
Yeah, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And there have been more players' rights, given to them because they're employees, right? But they have the reason we're all going to see these games isn't because of what the front office does. We're going to go see because of who's on the field playing. And that's, the players understand that, and they've been given those rights. So for him to say anything about, oh, just shut up and retire or whatever it was, shut the hell up, man. You don't know what it is anymore. Yeah. And these players, they deserve to have a say.
Yeah, absolutely. And employees, yes, but when you think about it, they're subcontractors, right? Your GM is your foreman. Your owner, obviously, is the one who bought the land and everything else. But these guys are subcontractors. So they're absolutely entitled to, their creative opinions and liberties. And the NFL, for the longest time, has probably stomped on these players' rights and voices. And, what we've seen over the course of the last 3 to 4 seasons, right, is these players are starting to find their voices. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you agree with everything they say or you don't, or you're somewhere in between, it doesn't matter. They're finding their voices. And when you have someone like James Harden work his way out of Houston by simply just not showing up, or showing up 20 pounds overweight and saying, I don't want to play for you guys anymore, screw you guys, trade me, and then just sit. You don't think NFL players say that and go, wait, how'd he just do that? Like, I want to be able to, have a voice, and if I'm unhappy with the situation. So this is, Alex, you're absolutely right. Like, this is a point where the old guard who just doesn't get it needs to stay out of it. Like, get off my lawn, guys. Like, it's a completely different animal. It's more of a business now than it's ever been. These guys have branding and sponsorships and, life after football that they're looking at. But while they're there, and yes, they're getting paid handsomely to do so, but they want to feel like, hey, if I'm the face of your franchise and have been for 16 years, why am I not at least say, hey, what do you think about this guy? Like, hey, what are your thoughts here? Like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Like, what's your opinion? For God's sake, the LA Chargers had Justin Herbert in the draft room.
Yeah.
In the freaking draft room. He's 1 year in, and the Chargers already said, hey, Justin, come here. We want your opinion on this. We're not guaranteeing that it's going to go the way you want, but you're at least going to get a seat at the table to have a voice.
Or to at least be included in it. Yeah. Just be included in it. Yeah.
So, yes, it's been an ongoing thing. Our boy, I saw your question. How do the Broncos make that trade happen? It's pretty simple. You give up your first-round pick next year, your third-round pick next year, and then you give up whatever defensive starter the Packers want. You're not going to give up Cortland Sutton. You're not going to give up Jerry Jeudy, and you're not going to give up Noah Fant. And outside of that, any offensive player that they want is probably on the table too. So that's how you make that happen. After June 2nd, the cap hit for Rodgers goes down by $13 million. And that's how it fits under the salary cap. Because right now it's at $38 million, I believe. The Broncos have $26 million in cap space. So take out the 13. Now you're sitting under that amount, plus the players that you give up, and all the financials kind of work out. So the Packers can get younger, build around the defense a little bit if that's what they choose to do while they bring Jordan Love up. And the Broncos get their quarterback for the next, 3 to 5 years, depending on what they do after they restructure Rodgers. So in a nutshell, that's how that trade happens.
And it only happens after June 1st.
Yeah, this trade will not happen for another 30 days.
Yeah.
Right? We are a minimum of 30 days away from this happening. So we are going to be sitting on our hands until then, and we shall see what happens. Moving on, outside of this.
Yeah, we belabored that point.
I don't know that there's kind of going in this. So it makes sense that the Ravens give Lamar his 5th-year option. I agree with that. Like, he was electric for 1 year. He was kind of meh. That whole offense was last year. You need to see him develop as a passer before you start paying this guy $35+ million a season as a, franchise quarterback, and not a almost lesser version of what Michael Vick was in his prime, right? Because that's always been the comparison, is Lamar Jackson or Michael Vick. Michael Vick could sling it, guys. The NFL was a bit different game last year. It was more focused on the ground, so Vick had some creative liberties of being able to run around. I'm telling you, Michael Vick in today's game, QB1.
No doubt.
QB1. Like, it's him, Mahomes, and Kyler, and then everyone else is taking a back seat, including Josh Allen. So there's just a difference in that. So good for him. I don't know that there's been anybody kicked in the nuts harder throughout their career so far than Hayden Hurst. You get drafted in the first round by the Ravens. You kind of take that learning year as a rookie to figure out the NFL, as most rookie tight ends do. Then poof, Mark Andrews comes onto the scene and has a record-breaking rookie tight end season. And then you play with him for your second year as you're trying to come up and about. Okay, well, hey, here we're getting traded to the Falcons. Oh, I had a pretty serviceable year with the Falcons. Not as good as I think what our show, right? We were thinking it was going to be a little bit better, but he was very serviceable for the Falcons. And then what do? Oh, hey, we're going to take Kyle Pitts 4th overall, and we're going to decline your 5th-year option. So Hayden Hurst is sitting dead in the water at this point. So now it becomes a contract year. Alex's point. That's interesting to me. Like, I think the Falcons could do some interesting things for this. So do you play Kyle Pitts more as a slot receiver to where it actually takes away from like a Russell Gage? So you have Julio, Ridley on the outsides. You play Kyle Pitts off the line and more in that slot area to have him matched up against either small DBs or slow linebackers and create that mismatch. And you let Hayden Hurst stay in line more. And then maybe because of that, Hurst doesn't fall back as far if Pitts is treated more like a receiver. So we'll see how that all shakes loose. The Broncos letting go of Jeff Driscoll, whoop-de-freaking-do. Juwan James injuring himself today and losing their right tackle again. Like, I don't know that there's been a bigger bust in a right tackle free agent as the Broncos have in Juwan James. But the good thing is it frees up about $10 million in cap space because it wasn't on the company time. So he doesn't have that injury, the injury clause built in because it wasn't at the facility. So sucks to suck, dude, but you've been stealing money from Denver for 3 seasons now. So at least now the Broncos can get a little bit of it back. And outside of that, yeah, that's the big news outside of the draft, I guess. So
it's also really disappointing of the timing of that because if you would have known, say, 5 days ago, 6 days ago, maybe we take a tackle somewhere.
But the Bears let their left tackle go. Like, there's some possibilities here. Offensive linemen kind of bob and weave. And it's better to know now to come up with a game plan before OTAs even hit than getting in the middle of OTAs and preseason and then they go down. Like, at least this way, you have time. Like, okay, if we got a wheel and deal, we can. Like, if we need to really look at an undrafted free agent to build some depth and move the offensive line around a little bit, we can do that too. So, yes, a week and a half earlier would have been great. You know, maybe we would have taken the tackle out of Northwestern, Slater, instead of Surtain. But whatever.
Again, nothing against Patrick Surtain.
No, it's not.
It's
really
all about
not.
Denver.
I like the guy's game. This is about the Broncos. I like Surtain's game. But I digress. I've beat this horse until it's been dead.
All righty. Well, so let's limit this next topic down to like not Broncos draft because I think we've covered our reactions to that one. But let's get some draft reactions here. You know, what you liked, what surprised you, what team you thought did really well, and what team didn't necessarily do very well. So, guys, what are your thoughts and reactions to the NFL draft?
I thought the Jets crushed the draft. Like, and normally the Jets do jet type things. But I thought the Jets' first 3 picks were really their first 4 picks were out of this world. They got their quarterback. Oh, hey, we need a guard. Oh, let's trade back up. Let's get the guard out of USC. Vera Tucker, thank you. Oh, by the way, we need a receiver. Okay, let's go get more out of Ole Miss to help play, in the slot outside a little bit because we're not going to bring Crowder back after this season. And then, oh, yeah, we need a running back. So let's go ahead and grab Carter from UNC. And while he's not a 3-down workhorse back, he's very versatile. He catches the ball out of the backfield. And, oh, by the way, he finds the end zone very regularly. So I thought the Jets' first 4 picks were all really good. They addressed needs. They instantly bolstered that side of the ball. And they very quickly moved away from the Adam Gase era, and you can see how Saleh wants to build this offense, and it already has his name stamped all over it because he drafted 4 guys for it in the first 4 picks he had.
Okay, so the team that I thought crushed it, and they've really just been crushing all offseason, I think, is the Carolina Panthers. I thought that they had a really, really strong draft. They go J.C. Horn in the first round to help bolster that defense. And then they go Terrace Marshall in the second round, the wideout. And then they go tackle in the third round, and they pick up a tight end in the third round. But the fourth round pick is the one that I think is it's hard to say that it's going to pay dividends with a healthy Christian McCaffrey, but are you going to get a healthy Christian McCaffrey? And you get Chuba Hubbard in the fourth round. And that kid, I thought it was great to see the social media post from the Panthers. If you didn't see it, it's fantastic. It is, Matt Rule calling Chuba Hubbard and saying, "Hey man, are you coming?" And Hubbard's like, yeah, what's going on? He's like, "My wife told me if I don't pick you up after seeing, what you did to us all those years when I was at Baylor, that I wasn't going to be able to come home tonight." So the fact that Chuba Hubbard is going to go play in Carolina. Now, I don't think that he pays dividends right away because Christian McCaffrey is the all-everything back. But if Christian McCaffrey, can't give you 100%, Chuba Hubbard's pretty good. He's not Christian McCaffrey, but he's pretty good. And so I think the Panthers had a really, really strong draft there and picked up, some really good value, especially getting Hubbard there in the fourth round.
Yeah, the one that go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I would completely agree with that. I think that the one thing about Chuba Hubbard is not that he eats or takes away from McCaffrey per se, but does he help McCaffrey just enough, a la Tony Pollard with Zeke, right?
It's a good compliment, right?
Yes,
should be
he's
a good compliment.
And so in McCaffrey playing, instead of him playing 95% of the snaps, does now he play 85% of the snaps? And you keep that shelf life on McCaffrey longer as his career goes on. Like, that's kind of how I see this one playing out. Kind of stinks for Chuba in a way, right? Because I feel like he had enough in him to go really compete at a team who didn't have an all-pro running back sitting right in front of him. But you know what? It's job security because the Panthers learned their lesson last year.
Absolutely. One of the teams that I was a little surprised at was that number 5 pick with Cincinnati going Jamar Chase. And that was something that was very interesting, was the fact that you saw a lot of, college teammates kind of teaming up again in the pros. Happened several times throughout the night. So it was very interesting to kind of watch that play out. As far as a team that I thought did very well with the draft was the Chicago Bears, making the trade up to go get Justin Fields and then picking up Tevin Jenkins in the second round. I thought was a very, very good move where you got the guy to help protect him and you've got the new franchise QB there. And it'll be interesting to see how they kind of play that thing out. Is Justin Fields day one starter? Do they slow roll him a little bit? So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of works out there in Chicago. But I thought the Bears did very well through the first couple rounds.
And if I'm the Bears, I let him sit for at least the first part of this year. You've got Andy Dalton. You've only got a year invested,
Nick Foles.
And you've got Nick Foles. Let the kid learn the speed of the NFL game. Let him figure it out. Let him learn how to be a professional football player, and then turn him loose. And this could be a franchise changer for the Bears.
I'm going to give a quick honorable mention to the Dallas Cowboys. We've been saying how bad their defense was, how Jerry needed to get out of his own way, how they needed to, work on all these things. The Cowboys had a textbook draft for what their needs were, right? Micah Parsons, odds-on favorite already for Rookie of the Year on any of the sports betting sites. You follow that up with Calvin Joseph, the cornerback out of Kentucky, which helps their secondary because it was so terrible. Oh, and then you go and get Osa, and I'm going to butcher his last name, guys. Odiwusa, the defensive tackle from UCLA, back to the line. Oh, and then we're going to pick up a defensive end out of Iowa. Oh, hey, more defense. And then we're going to pick up another cornerback. Oh, more defense. Like, the Cowboys got it, guys. And the picks where they didn't go defense, 2 offensive linemen and 1 receiver. Like, they went back to basics of how to fundamentally build a draft, and they did it the right way. They have a strong middle linebacker now. It'll be interesting to see what they do. They have 4 linebackers that are all pretty damn good now, right? Like, you have Jalen Smith, you have Leighton Vander Esch, you just picked up Micah Parsons, and Jabril Cox out of LSU, who they also picked up in this draft, is a pretty damn good linebacker in his own
Out of
right.
North Dakota State.
Out of LSU.
The only reason he got to LSU was because he spent 4 years at NDSU.
But all these things, so my hat is off to them. They didn't get enamored with the shiny toys in the window and everything else. They got dirty. They got a little ugly. But they absolutely addressed what they needed to as a team. So kudos to the Cowboys. And I think even though this is all defensive minded, I think this helps Zeke more than anybody else on that Dallas Cowboys roster. Because if you're playing from the lead, that's the guy who's getting the ball to salt the game away. It's not going to be on Dak Prescott's right arm. It's going to be on Zeke. So I like this draft. I like it even more so as a Zeke Elliott apologist. And I think this is really going to help him have a great bounce back year.
Well, and I thought the move of them moving from 10 back to 12, getting some more assets in return to move it back 2 spots to get the guy that they needed anyway there. That was a very, very good move. And I cannot fault their draft at all. So yeah, no, I definitely like the Cowboys moves there as well. Any other thoughts on the draft?
Go watch the replay of our live stream from when we were doing it. You'll get much better reactions.
Yes.
You can go see some real-time reactions and Kevin about throwing his phone through his basement wall.
Yeah, it was pretty good there. So guys, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some trades for fantasy purposes here. And so it was one of those that, Alex, you got a text from Kevin and myself over the weekend asking about which decision you would take in a specific trade. Now, the terms of the trade were Superflex. It's a dynasty. And you're looking at Sam Darnold for Curtis Samuel, a 2021, the 302, a 2021 502, and a 2021 512. So, Alex, which side of that trade would you want?
I'm going back to look at what my immediate reaction was because it might have changed. Where is this at? Hold on. I should have prepared for this. We text too much.
So while he's looking that up, Kevin, without giving the listeners which side of the trade you had, which side of that trade did you like?
I think for the needs of both squads involved, it filled what you needed, right? On one side, you acquire some assets. You're able to get a little bit younger, another piece in the wide receiver room, and kind of see how that is. The other side obviously needed a quarterback. They weren't trying to, shoot the moon and go, oh, I'm getting a top 5 QB. It was a guy that was serviceable. He's in a new spot. You're gambling a little bit, but he's with a coaching staff that wanted him there, which is always a good thing to have as a quarterback. So, for what each team individually needed, this trade made sense as to why it went through and why we agreed upon it. But I can see it from both sides. I'm partial to my side because it's my side, but I'm sure Derek's partial to his side because it was his side of the trade as well. So it is what it is.
Okay, so I found my explanation after my immediate reaction to the trade. And what I said initially was the 2 5th-round picks that were thrown in there. I'm not so keen on how valuable 5th-round rookie picks are. You know, you're going to get some decent players out of that, but you're not going to get, you know, your upper echelon of players. So in my eyes, 5th-round rookie picks, those are kind of roll the dice picks. It's take a flyer on a guy and hope he pans out. You know, that's what a 5th-round pick is. So the other side of that is Sam Darnold, which we know is a quarterback in what is sure to be a high-powered offense. And I just got done singing the praises about how good this team did in the draft, and mostly because of the offensive weapons that they or the offensive needs that they addressed. So I said it's a starting quarterback in a high-powered offense. Curtis Samuel is a little bit appealing with Fitzpatrick in Washington now. And that does add to the appeal. Coupled with the draft picks, I think it's okay. But ultimately, I said I like the Darnold side more because it's the known versus the unknown. And with those 5th-round picks, you're not really sure what you're going to get. With Curtis Samuel going to Washington and Fitzpatrick, you're not really sure what you're going to get out of that. So I went with the known, even though Darnold is with a new situation himself. He's got so many weapons around him now that I think it's safe to say that he's a known commodity. So I said the known versus the unknown. I'd lean towards the known. So I like the Darnold side more than I like the Curtis Samuel with all the picks.
Fair enough. Now, when we were making this trade, it was one of those that, you know, it was about it. It was one of those that it really is about as fair of a trade as I've seen in a while there, as far as kind of both sides getting what they needed as well as what was given up and what was acquired for each side. But let me ask you a question. Does knowing what those draft picks turned into change your mind at all?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, it should. Information always helps.
All right. So here's what the 302, the 502, and the 512 turned into. So the 302 became Kenneth Gainwell to partner up on that squad that also had Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. So you've got the entire Eagles run game handcuffed there. The 502 and the 512 turned into 2022 fourth and a 2023 fourth with some more trades made down the road.
Immediacy, I guess, the Darnold side, in my opinion, still is the better side.
Would Michael
It's
Gallup,
a long game. It's a long game that you're playing with these draft picks. And it's just, to me, like, you know, draft picks right now don't help me. And I'm always, I've come into playing fantasy football and admittedly still very new to the dynasty side of things. So for me, you know, I always focus on what can you do for me now, not what can I potentially turn you into later. So that's kind of what my thinking behind it.
Would Michael Gallup instead of Curtis Samuel change your mind at all?
No, not at all. In fact, because to me, Gallup is the third receiver on that, where I think Curtis Samuel is the much better, more viable option to be like in that wide receiver 2-ish category, maybe wide receiver 3-ish category. Whereas with Michael Gallup, I mean, there's just too many mouths to feed there in Dallas. You guys know my thoughts on the Dallas wide receiver room. It's hit or miss, and hopefully you hit more than you miss with one of them.
All righty. Another trade option for you. Josh Jacobs for Laviska Shenault and a 2022 third. Which side do you want?
I think when you guys posed this out to me, I went with the Visca. I think I said Visca et al. Was
You did.
the side that I wanted. I'm not sold on Josh Jacobs. Okay, so here's my have no reason for this. Only I think I read something once and it has stuck in my head for forever. I don't know that Josh Jacobs is on the good side of John Gruden right now. And I think when you get on Chucky's bad side, he doesn't forget. And I'm not sure that it's going to be easy for him to get off of Gruden's bad side. So to me, I'm fading Josh Jacobs a lot this year based solely on that. And I probably should do some more reading into it, but I just don't like what his trajectory is right now.
Okay. Kevin, which side of that one did you want?
I don't know if I'm trusting. I'm going Jacobs. I haven't been thrilled with what's been around in the third round of the drafts lately. And I'm not sold on Laviska Shenault. I'm not sold the fact that he can stay healthy. Yes, they're using him in a lot of creative ways last year in Jacksonville, but Urban Meyer, we have no idea what his offense is going to look like. At least we know what his offense looks like there in LA or in Las Vegas. And if I can get a running back, yes, maybe he's not, the top 10 running back that we all thought he would be, but he still finished in the top 10. He got there, kind of up and down, as we noted when we covered the Raiders. But if I'm only giving up Shenault and a 2022 third, I mean, I'll take the running back and the depth there all day.
Very cool. Moving on to another Dynasty Superflex, and it's all draft picks here. So little interested to see here. So it's the 2021 pick 101 and a 2022 second rounder for the 2021 201, the 2021 302, and a 2022 first.
It's the 2021 102.
Okay.
You said 201.
I'm sorry. Yes, so it's the 102. Yes.
Yeah. Essentially, you're trading the first overall pick
for the second overall pick.
For the second overall pick, a third round pick, and a first round pick the next year.
Yes.
If I am not dying for a quarterback, like absolutely dying for Trevor Lawrence specifically, then I'm taking the spot back. Yeah. I can get Justin Fields if I want a quarterback that bad. I can go Najee Harris. I can go, Kyle Pitts, or I can go anywhere, right? If I am not dying for Trevor Lawrence, I am gladly trading back and acquiring the assets. And the kicker is the first the next year, because there's plenty of talent, there in that first round of any rookie draft. The top 10, 12, 14 guys is, you can be happy with that to start a draft. So yeah, I'll slide back the pick and take the 102, 302, and a 2022 first.
That's the exact thing. If you're not dying for a quarterback, if you're not dying to have Trevor Lawrence on your team, there's no need to be in the 101.
That team was, but it also had a lot more needs than just a quarterback. So it really needed a complete team rehaul on that one. So moving back to acquire more picks was my thought process there. So
can I brag on a rookie draft that I had that we just completed here?
I know which one you're going to do. And yes,
sure.
The floor is yours.
Okay. So let this start out with, I had the 102. How was that? The 102, 110. No, excuse me. The 102, the 104, the 110, the 302, 402, and 5-2 and 5-12. Okay. Najee Harris at 1.2, Kyle Pitts at 1.4, Javonte Williams at 1.10. I then packaged my second round pick, so my 2.2 and my second round pick for next year, in return for the 1.12 and a third round pick next year. I did that to acquire Jalen Waddle. And then the aforementioned trade that Derek and I first broke the news about when we were talking trades, traded my 302 pick and my 2 5th-round picks to acquire Sam Darnold. And then to finish it off, I grabbed Tutu Atwell at 402 to kind of round out my draft. That was my rookie draft right after the NFL draft finished. And
Well
I'm not
done.
gonna lie, guys. I was pretty damn proud of this one because this addressed a bunch of needs with a bunch of top end talent. And I feel like it really kind of set me up here for a bit of a long haul. Now, I didn't grab a quarterback, but I got Darnold, which kind of filled that gap of not taking one of the rookie quarterbacks at the top end. So I was able to kind of justify it that way. So came away with a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and a tight end in a 5-round rookie draft.
Not to mention that quarterback's really young too. Like, he's still really young.
So the catalyst for this was I traded away DeAndre Swift pre-draft to acquire the 1.4 and the 1.10. So I got Kyle Pitts and Javonte Williams for DeAndre Swift. That's basically what that trade out. Now, we're going to see how these rookies pan out. But for all intents and purposes, I'm very happy with this decision. And at the moment, I challenge anybody to show me a better draft result than what I have right here.
I like it. I like it a lot. Well, guys, I do believe that that's going to take us about to the end. Any final thoughts for the listeners?
If you're into dynasty leagues, like really, really into dynasty leagues, and you like doing all that research, make sure you're paying attention to who's around in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, guys. Like for everyone kind of touting how deep this draft class was, I'm not finding it. There's some guys that you could draft that are potential assets. There's some guys who have some okay landing spots, and you can see some of that. But because of the landing spots of some of these players, Rashard Bateman, right? He just went like there's still people drafting him at the top of the 2nd round. God only knows why. He's playing for freaking Baltimore, guys. Like, I like Rashard Bateman a lot, but that I don't know that I'd draft him in the 3rd round. And maybe I would, just seeing what else is out there, but I'm definitely not taking him in the top 3rd of the 2nd round. And that's where he's consistently going. But there are some guys to be had late. So if you haven't done your rookie draft yet and you're in dynasties, start scrolling through there, start looking through the names, seeing where these guys land, and seeing what you can do, because there's a couple values up until about the last 1/3 of the 2nd round, it seems like, and then it starts drying up pretty quick, and you're throwing darts, and you're about 20 players into the draft. So do some research, take your time, pay attention. If you're not sure, holler at us. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, email, our website. Let us know. We'll try and help you through some of that. But the first couple rookie drafts I've done this week, every single one of them, I get to the back half of the 2nd round, I'm going, well, this sucks. I'm just going to punt and see if I can trade my 3rd for 2nd next year and see if it shuffles the deck a little bit better, because I'm not blown away by the clear path of production because of a lot of where these guys landed.
Yeah, it's draft season, so good luck, everybody. Enjoy it. It's a fun time. Derek and I are co-owning a team. It's the first time I've co-owned a team in a while, and it's been a lot of fun talking through our draft picks. And if I do say so myself, we're not doing so bad.
Yeah, I'm liking that one so far. We'll see how this kind of finishes out on that one. Kevin and I are also doing a team together in a NFL coaches style type of league, and very happy with that team so far as well. So it'll be interesting to see how all of these things kind of come out. But well, guys, I do believe that that's going to take us all the way down to the end of it. And for everybody out there, appreciate you tuning in and sticking with us this far into the night. Make sure that you're hitting us up on the socials, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, all of those things at Good Old Boys FF. The YouTube channel is the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Do us a favor, give us a follow, give us a subscribe, leave a review. We love to get all the feedback. But any questions, let us know. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.